After my husband passed away, my in-laws felt sorry for me, especially because I was pregnant. Out of concern for the family's legacy, they suggested that his twin brother take responsibility for continuing the family line. For both families, my sister-in-law, Maria, was furious. She accused me of being shameless, slapped me across the face, and fainted from crying and anger. That night, I stood outside my in-laws' door. I had originally planned to talk them out of this idea, to explain that it was unnecessary and unfair to everyone involved. But before I could knock, I overheard a conversation that made my heart freeze. My mother-in-law asked in a confused voice, "Colin, clearly it was your elder brother who died. Why do you insist on saying it was you?" A man sighed softly. Maria's health has always been fragile. If she knew that Alex had passed away, she wouldn't be able to take it. And the truth is, the person I've always loved is her. I married Linda only to fulfill my elder brother's wishes. I have already given her a child. I don't owe her anything anymore. From now on, I will take care of Maria. On behalf of my brother, please, don't bring up this idea about continuing the family line again. It will only upset her. Only then did I understand. It was not my husband who had died, it was his older brother, Alex. The next morning at breakfast, I sat at the table with my in-laws and calmly said, "You've all been telling me to move on. I've thought it through. I've decided to have an abortion and start over." The man who had been gently serving food to Maria suddenly stood up. "Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Make sure to subscribe to enjoy heartfelt stories every day. Now, let's begin the story. After my husband's funeral, I found out I was pregnant. For the sake of the baby, I did everything I could to suppress the grief in my heart. I was terrified that my emotions might harm the child, but due to my husband Colin's weak sperm quality, the pregnancy was especially difficult. I needed daily hormone injections to keep the pregnancy stable, and I was so sick I could barely eat. The constant vomiting made me dizzy and weak. I had only been pregnant for just over a month and had already lost more than 20 pounds. I was barely holding on. My in-laws, watching me struggle, tried to convince me to get an abortion. They told me to forget Colin and start fresh, but I refused. Colin had treated me with nothing but kindness. I could not bear to give up the child he left behind. Originally, I was not even engaged to Colin. I was supposed to marry his older brother, Alex, but just before the wedding, I was kidnapped. For 3 days and nights, I was abused and humiliated. When I was finally rescued, Alex looked at me with disgust and called off the engagement. Soon after, he married Maria instead. It was Colin who had come to save me. Even though he was stabbed multiple times, he still shielded me with his own body and carried me home. Then, he knelt in front of my father, blood still on his clothes, and asked to marry me. He said he had liked me for a long time. Over the years, under his gentle care, I slowly healed. The shadows of that past trauma began to fade, but our happiness did not last. Just 3 years into our marriage, he was suddenly gone, killed in a car crash. My entire world fell apart. I even considered ending my own life, but then I found out I was pregnant. That child became my reason to keep going. He was Colin's only bloodline. Even if it meant risking my life, I had to protect him. At first, my in-laws accepted my decision, but during lunch the next day, they brought up something shocking. They wanted Colin's twin brother, Alex, to take on the responsibility of fathering a child for both families, to care for me and raise the baby. I was stunned. I wanted to reject the idea, but before I could say anything, Maria erupted. She slapped me across the face and screamed that I was shameless. She was already in poor health and did not give me a chance to explain. Her emotions overwhelmed her, and she fainted. Alex, clearly upset, carried Maria out without saying a word to me. Her slap triggered another episode of cramping. I was confined to bed for 2 days before I finally began to feel better. I did not blame Maria. After all, I had once been engaged to Alex. Her reaction was understandable, and no matter how close I had been with Colin, the whole situation, suggesting Alex take responsibility for 2 families, was absurd. It was not just uncomfortable for them, I did not agree with it either. Feeling guilty for making Maria faint, I decided to visit my in-laws to put an end to the suggestion once and for all. I also planned to visit Alex and Maria afterward to apologize in person. But when I reached their room, I overheard something I was never meant to hear. My mother-in-law's voice floated through the slightly open door. Colin, clearly it was your elder brother who died. Why do you keep saying it was you? Colin, that was my husband's name. He was alive. I stood frozen, unable to move, my heart thudded wildly in my chest. Then a man's voice replied from inside. Mom, do not tell Maria. Her heart is weak, she would not survive the truth. It was my elder brother who died, not me. Her body clearly could not handle it. Alex. No, I should say Colin, my husband. Colin. He paused, let out a long sigh, and said, the truth is, I have always loved Maria. I only married Linda to fulfill my elder brother's wish and make Maria happy. Now that I have given Linda a child, I have repaid everything I owe her. From now on, I will take care of Maria for the rest of my life on behalf of my brother. Please, do not bring up the idea of taking responsibility for both families again. I do not want to make Maria sad. My mother-in-law tried to reason with him, but Linda has already suffered so much. Back then, it was you who had her kidnapped for 3 days and nights just to break off her engagement with your brother, so Maria could marry him instead. She endured so much humiliation. Now that she has finally moved on and is pregnant with your child, the least you can do is take some responsibility. Colin cut her off impatiently. Enough, Mom. I married her to make up for the past. Even though people laughed at me and called me pathetic, I took care of her with everything I had for 3 years. I helped her recover, helped her live a peaceful life. Is that not enough? Do you really expect me to repay her for the rest of my life? I have endured this for 3 years. I have been pretending for 3 years. Living with her has been a daily torment. Now, God has given me a second chance to be with Maria. I do not want to miss it. I could not hear the rest. My mind went blank, and my body turned cold, as if someone had plunged a knife into my chest. The pain was suffocating. I stumbled back to my room, realizing that my whole body was shaking and my face was soaked with tears. So the person who died in the car accident was not my husband at all, but his older brother, Alex, and Colin. His love, his tenderness, everything over the past 3 years, had all been a lie. The person he truly loved had always been Maria. Even worse, the person who arranged my kidnapping all those years ago was him. He had done it just to push me out of the way, to let Maria marry his brother. If they did not want to go through with the engagement, they could have ended it properly. But instead, they chose to ruin me. What was even more absurd was that I had seen him as my savior, even willing to risk my life to give birth to his child. I tried my best to calm myself, but the hatred and pain kept pouring out. My tears would not stop. The next morning, I went downstairs with red, swollen eyes and a pale face. I saw Colin carefully helping Maria with her breakfast. They sat close together, sharing quiet affection. From a distance, they looked like a perfect couple. I clenched my fists. The pain in my palms helped clear my mind. Maria soon noticed me. She glanced at my messy appearance and smiled faintly, her eyes filled with pride. Then, as if to show off, she nestled into Colin's arms and acted coy. Colin's attention was completely on her. He gently helped her eat, tender and attentive. Not even realizing I was there, I lowered my eyes and looked at the way he smiled at her. That kind of warmth, that kind of care, I had never seen it in the past 3 years, not even once. I placed my hand over my belly and sat down calmly at the table. I kept my head down and began to eat. I picked nutritious food and forced myself to eat more. I needed to stay strong. I would have the abortion, recover, and then make sure everyone who hurt me paid the price, twice over. After I finished eating, I wiped my mouth. Colin had just finished serving Maria. Only then did he look up at me. When he saw my pale face and swollen eyes, he was slightly stunned. For a moment, there was guilt in his expression, perhaps thinking I had cried over his supposed death, but it faded quickly, replaced by coldness. Sister-in-law, he said harshly, I understand you are sad about Colin's death, but I will not take responsibility for both families. My heart belongs to Maria, and Maria alone. I cannot give even a little bit of it to anyone else. Maria looked even more pleased with herself, but on the surface, she feigned concern. Sister-in-law, she said softly, you did not cry all night just because my husband won't take responsibility, did you? I am sorry, I acted rashly yesterday, but he is my beloved, I cannot compromise. Her voice trembled slightly, tears gathered in her eyes again. She clutched her chest as if overcome with emotion. Colin gave me a fierce glare, then turned to comfort her gently. "Do not worry, Maria, you are the only one I love. I would rather die than ever touch another woman." How ironic. Then what about the child in my belly? Did it just appear out of thin air? But I said nothing. He was already dead to me. I took a deep breath and steadied my emotions. I refused to look at the loving couple any longer. "Do not worry," I said calmly. "The idea of taking responsibility for both families is ridiculous. I will never agree to it." Colin turned to me in surprise. He had not expected that. I looked up and saw my in-laws slowly making their way downstairs. They had clearly heard everything I had just said. Their eyes shifted toward my pale face and tear-swollen eyes, each of them looking at me with visible pity. My mother-in-law hesitated, seeming unsure whether to speak. "Linda," she began softly. I looked at my in-laws, and a surge of mixed emotions flooded my chest. Since marrying into their family, they had indeed treated me well. Their concern for me these past few days had seemed genuine. But the moment I remembered it was Colin, their own son, who had orchestrated my kidnapping and allowed me to be tortured for 3 whole days, and that they had all known, keeping this horrifying truth from me alone, my feelings toward them became too tangled to describe. I could no longer bring myself to call them Mom and Dad. "You heard it all just now," I said flatly. "This idea of me taking responsibility for 2 families is ridiculous. I do not agree with it." My mother-in-law probably recalled what Colin had said the day before. She did not try to argue. Instead, she sighed deeply and said, "I know you loved Colin deeply and cannot let him go. That is why you would not agree to this. But, Linda, I really do feel sorry for you." She paused for a moment, then looked at Colin before turning back to me. Her tone grew more sincere. "Colin is gone now, but you are still here, still alive. Life has to go on. I hope you will stop dwelling on the past and try to move forward. You deserve to begin a new life." Colin and Maria, sitting beside her, both looked visibly relieved when I expressed my disagreement with taking on the responsibility. Their expressions lightened as though a weight had been lifted. But Colin's gaze was different, more complicated, unreadable. He stared at me for a moment, then, picking up on his mother's words, started to speak in his usual gentle, fake concern. "Sister-in-law, Mom is right. Colin is no longer here. No matter how much you loved him, he is gone. You are separated by life and death now, and there is no way for you two to be together again. You still need to live your own life. Let him go, for your own good, and his. Fortunately, he left you with a child. You can still live your life, raise the baby, and carry on his memory, for the sake of that child in your belly. You need to be strong, move on." As I listened to Colin's sanctimonious words, I could not help sneering inside. A child? Did he really expect me to give birth to his child? The thought was laughable. He was truly delusional. Though I was filled with contempt, I kept my expressions soft and pretended to be moved. I followed their lead, replying gently, "You are right. I thought about it all night and finally figured things out. I was too stubborn before. I made you all worry." I lowered my eyes and added slowly, "Besides, since Colin had naturally weak sperm, and this pregnancy has been so difficult, maybe it is fate. Perhaps he is simply not meant to have a descendant in this life, so I want to respect the will of heaven and do as you all suggested. I will have an abortion, let him go completely, remarry, and start over." I placed my hand gently over my belly, pretending to sigh. After all, Colin had been such a cruel person. Not having a child was already merciful. To be honest, I was even afraid that if I gave birth to his child, it might be born with deformities. For my own sake, and for the future of that unborn child, I could not allow this pregnancy to continue. When I looked up again, everyone around me was stunned into silence. My in-laws looked flustered, Colin's expression twisted with rage and disbelief. Hearing me say I would have an abortion, and that Colin was fated to have no descendants, clearly struck a nerve. He stood up abruptly and shouted without thinking, "Who told you to have an abortion?" But the moment those words escaped his mouth, he realized he had gone too far. He quickly took a deep breath, trying to collect himself. But the anger on his face was hard to hide. After a long pause, he frowned and said with a hint of reproach, "Sister-in-law, Colin just passed away, and now you want to have an abortion and talk about remarrying. Is that really appropriate? That baby is his only bloodline." And Colin treated you so well before. What you are doing now feels too cruel. I blinked and turned to my in-laws with an innocent expression. Weren't you the ones who kept urging me to let go of Colin and have an abortion? Their faces shifted. They looked awkward and a little uncomfortable. After all, no parent wants to hear someone say their son was never meant to have children, but they quickly pulled themselves together and looked at me with disapproval in their eyes. My mother-in-law sighed. Linda, I know this pregnancy has been hard on you, and I have always worried about your health. That is why I wanted to persuade you to let go, but you care so deeply about this child, and I do not want you to regret your decision later. My father-in-law added, Yes, Linda, have you really thought this through? Back then, when we tried to talk you into ending the pregnancy, you were so firm. You kept saying this was Colin's only bloodline, that you would never agree. Are you really willing now? Please do not make a decision you will regret later. Of course, we support whatever choice you make, we just want you to be sure. As for remarrying, yes, we hope you meet someone good, but are you really ready to let go of Colin now? I hope you will express your sadness when you are feeling down. Do not bottle up your pain or pretend you have let go of him just to put us at ease. Listening to their words, I felt a strange heaviness in my chest. It was not just Colin. His entire family seemed to want me to keep this child. I finally understood that when they had tried to persuade me to get an abortion before, it was not because they truly wanted that outcome. They had simply assumed that since I only cared about Colin, I would never agree to keep the baby. Their words back then were just polite excuses, but I let it go quickly. After all, to them, I was always an outsider. I am tired. I am going to rest now, I said quietly. Nodding without energy, I did not want to argue anymore. I turned around and slowly walked upstairs. I had already made up my mind. I would not give birth to this child. But with the way they were resisting now, I was afraid they would not let me have an abortion so easily. It seemed I had to find a chance to leave this house as soon as possible. As for taking revenge on Colin, I would take my time. Later that night, when I went downstairs to get a glass of water, I overheard a conversation between Colin and his parents in the living room. Mom, we absolutely cannot let Linda have an abortion, Colin said. I stopped in my tracks, heart beating faster. I have naturally weak sperm, he continued, his voice a mix of shame and urgency, and Maria's health is fragile. She cannot handle a pregnancy. Now that my older brother is gone, this might be the only child I will ever have. If Linda goes through with the abortion, our family might never have another heir. He paused and then added, if she does not want to raise the child, we can have the baby and let Maria raise it. She has always longed to be a mother but has not been able to have children because of her health. She is gentle, kind, and I know she will treat the child with love. My mother-in-law sighed, her voice filled with sadness. I do not want our family to be without a descendant either. But Linda is not just talking about an abortion. She also wants to remarry. You know how much we rely on her father's support for the company. If she insists, we will not be able to stop her. Right after she spoke, my father-in-law's voice rang out, laced with disappointment. If Linda has the abortion and remarries, she will have no connection with our family anymore, and the Yi family certainly will not support us then. I have always told you, you should take on the responsibility of both families. That way, we can keep Linda and keep the child. But you refused. Look at the mess we are in now. Surprisingly, Colin was not panicked. He laughed coldly and said with confidence, Come on, do you really think she wants to have an abortion or marry someone else? She loves me too much. If it were not for this child, she would have ended her life already. This baby is her emotional anchor. She will never be able to give it up. As for remarriage, he scoffed, she is only saying that to make me angry. Who else could she possibly love besides me? Do not worry, she will not leave. She will give birth to the child and stay part of this family. Listening to his smug certainty, I could not help but laugh bitterly in my heart. What people say online is true. Men can be so shockingly ordinary, yet endlessly confident. My mother-in-law was quiet for a moment, then slowly nodded, seeming to accept what Colin had said. She is acting very strangely today. It must be just a tantrum, she said. Colin continued. The last time you brought up the idea of me taking responsibility for both families, Maria slapped her. Linda has been spoiled since she was young, so of course she was furious. Besides, even though she believes it was my brother who died, she still loves me. when she sees my face. It triggers feelings she cannot control. It is only natural she subconsciously treats my brother as me. This morning, she saw how close I was with Maria and got upset. Add to that what happened yesterday when Maria hit her, and she just snapped and said those things out of spite. He paused, then added with a sigh, she has not truly accepted my death. In her heart, if my brother can stand in for me, if she can use him as a substitute just to numb the pain and keep going, she will accept it. Everything she said was just to scare me into agreeing to take responsibility. My mother-in-law let out a long sigh, her tone now tinged with irritation. Linda is also at fault here. If she wants something, she should say it openly. Your father and I have always treated her like a daughter and would have done anything to help. Why does she have to be so dramatic and hurtful? Then she added, and you, I have told you again and again, you need to take responsibility for both families and care for her more attentively. Colin sounded a little impatient. Fine, I get it. Linda is difficult. Tomorrow, you can bring it up again. This time, I will agree. For the child's sake, I will give in one more time. The next morning at breakfast, just as expected, my father-in-law brought up the topic again. Linda, eat more, he said with a sigh. You look thinner than ever. This child is really draining you. I think it would be best to let Alex take on the responsibility of both families and take care of you from now on. My mother-in-law nodded in agreement and added, you are Colin's wife, and Alex is the eldest son of our family. As Colin's older brother, it is only natural for him to take on the family's responsibilities and look after you. There is no need for you to feel uncomfortable about it. I did not know what Colin had said to Maria the night before, but this time, she stayed silent. Her face was sour, her fists clenched tightly, and her eyes were filled with jealousy as she stared at me. I glanced at Colin. He looked annoyed, and his tone was cold and impatient. You suggested having an abortion yesterday just to force me into taking responsibility for both families, didn't you? Fine. For the sake of continuing the family bloodline, your sister-in-law and I will make this sacrifice and agree to it. He paused, then added harshly, but once I take on this burden, you had better stop throwing tantrums and threatening to abort the child. Do not break our hearts again, or the child's. Hearing him say that, I almost laughed from sheer anger. After everything heartless he had done, he still dared to talk about protecting a child. May he never have descendants to carry on his name. I had once genuinely cared about my in-laws. Despite the hardships, I still could not bring myself to cut ties completely, but after overhearing their conversation last night, I let go of any lingering affection. It became clear they had only treated me kindly because of my father. To them, I was just a useful outsider, someone they could take advantage of. Maybe it was for the best. I would have nothing to hold me back anymore. I shook my head and said coldly, there is no need for anyone to take responsibility for both families. My brother-in-law and sister-in-law can just focus on their own lives. As for my child, you do not need to worry. Earlier that morning, I had called my father and asked him to send a driver to pick me up. He had not arrived yet. And since everyone else in the house belonged to their family, I tried not to escalate the situation and kept a calm expression as I faced them. My father has been worried about me. He thinks I am too upset and is afraid I might do something reckless. He wants me to stay with him for a few days. My in-laws clearly wanted to object, but before they could speak, my father arrived with the driver in person. Their faces immediately lit up with forced smiles as they hurried to send me off. When my father saw me, thin, pale, and visibly drained, his eyes turned red with grief. He was a big, strong man, but his expression darkened with anger. He said nothing to my in-laws, completely ignoring them as he took me away. They stood there awkwardly. Colin's face was especially gloomy, as if he had just suffered a great humiliation. In the past, I would have tried to ease the tension. Even if my father was upset, I would have acted carefully to keep the peace. But not anymore. I no longer cared about this family. I got in the car without a word. Once we were out of their sight, I turned to my father and gently tried to comfort him. He did not know the full story of what Colin had done to me. He only saw how tired and worn out I had become and assumed their family had failed to care for me properly. That was enough to make him furious. My father had always been protective. I lost my mother at a young age, and he never remarried. He played the role of both father and mother, giving me all his love. People who knew him often said he had loved my mother deeply. When she died during childbirth, he nearly lost the will to live. I was the only reason he found the strength to go on. Since then, he poured everything he had into raising me. When Colin died, I thought perhaps my father and I were alike. Both unlucky people who had lost someone dear. I even tried to follow his example, believing I could treat this child as my hope for the future, love it, and raise it well. But I had been naive. My parents had known true love, and I was just someone else's pawn in a cruel joke. I had known Alex and Colin since kindergarten. Back then, I liked following Alex around. My father noticed and, thinking it was cute, went to their house and arranged an engagement between us. From that moment on, he began supporting their family financially. With my father's help, their family rose from modest beginnings to establish a business that eventually went public. Later, my fiancé was changed to Colin. I was humiliated, but my father, afraid they would look down on me, provided even more support just to secure me a better life. That support continued for years. Their family had grown used to the benefits. No wonder they were reluctant to let me go. They had used me for so long and hurt me so deeply, but now, I would make sure they paid back everything, with interest. Yesterday, I had already contacted a private investigator to monitor their every move. Around the clock after I left, I heard Colin, who rarely lost his temper in front of my father, kicked over a table in rage. She did it on purpose, he shouted. She deliberately called her father here to pressure us. I already agreed to take on the responsibility of both families. Why is she still doing this? My mother-in-law sighed and said, Linda has been spoiled since she was a child. Maybe it was your tone. You sounded unwilling, and Maria even dared to hit her. That must have made her upset, so she called Mr. Yi, let her stay at her father's place for a few days. The medical care there is better anyway, and it is safer for the baby. Yes, it would be better for the baby, and better for me, too. After a few more days, we will go and pick her up. My mother-in-law said calmly, when the time comes, speak gently, and bring up the matter of continuing the family line again. Once her anger cools and she sees how sincere we are, she will come back. Colin gave a cold snort. She made such a scene and threatened us just to force me to beg her to let me take on the responsibility for both families. Fine, for the sake of the family and the child, I will make that sacrifice again. My father-in-law frowned. This Linda is truly too pampered. One small disagreement, and she drags the whole family's dignity through the mud. No wonder both Alex and Colin dislike her. Luckily, Ely loves Colin so deeply and is willing to compromise for him. Otherwise, no one in this family would know how to deal with her. Colin sneered, her love, who cares? Maria is 100 times better than her. Give it another month. Once she starts to panic, she will stop playing hard to get and come back on her own. As he spoke, the entire family nodded in agreement. I stared at the video in silence, the one secretly recorded by a private investigator I had hired. Watching the family plot behind my back, I could not help but laugh, over and over. Did they really still expect me to give birth to a child for their family? That same day, I sat down with my father and told him about my decision to get an abortion. My father knew how painful this pregnancy had been for me. He had watched me suffer, and the moment I said I wanted to end it, he immediately agreed, without hesitation. He began arranging the best doctor to handle the procedure. I also told him there was no need to protect their family anymore. They did not deserve any more of our kindness, or our help, of course. I did not mention to him that Colin had once arranged for me to be kidnapped and humiliated. If my father found out, given his temper and how much he cared about me, he would not hesitate to take revenge. And frankly, Colin was not worth the risk. I would make him pay, but in my own way. After the abortion, I spent a month recovering. I no longer needed daily injections, and the constant nausea disappeared. My body gradually returned to normal, and I started gaining weight. My health improved significantly. Seeing my condition improve day by day, my father was overjoyed. When I told him I had truly moved on from Colin, he became even more enthusiastic. He immediately started arranging blind dates for me. He said he wanted to find a handsome, gentle man to marry into our family. I was a little overwhelmed. I was not ready to meet someone new, but I could not say no to my father. Word spread quickly. Every day, new men came to our home, lining up outside the villa just to meet me. In just 1 month, without the support of the Yi family, Colin's family began to fall apart. They could not hold on any longer and finally came to see me, Colin included. As fate would have it, when they arrived at the entrance of the villa, they happened to run into the crowd of men lined up for interviews to marry into our family. Colin stared at the group in shock. What is going on? Why are there so many people here? It's such a mess. He tried to move forward, but the crowd blocked his way completely. As he attempted to push through, a man grabbed his arm and said impatiently, "Hey, are you here to marry into the Yi family too? For Miss Linda, you need to line up. We have rules. No cutting." Colin and his parents were completely stunned. Colin looked around and asked, "Marry into the family? Which Miss Linda?" The man gave him a strange look. "Who else? Mister, Yi only has one daughter, Miss Linda. I heard her husband passed away not long ago. Now that she's single again, a lot of people want the chance to marry into her family. See all those guys? They are here for her." He pointed at the line stretching far beyond the gate. Colin's face twisted, as if he had just swallowed something rotten. "What are you all thinking?" He scoffed. "Linda is still pregnant with her late husband's child. She still has him in her heart. There's no way she would be looking for another man. You should all go home." The man shook his head and replied, "You must be out of the loop. Miss Linda already had an abortion. Mr. Yi has publicly announced that she is ready to move on. That child is gone. Now everyone has a chance." The words "had an abortion" hit like thunder. Colin, his father, and his mother all gasped in unison, their expressions instantly darkening. Colin snapped, "Impossible. She loved that child more than her own life. She would never, never let it go." Then, turning to the crowd, he sneered with contempt, "Even if she were available, are you people out of your minds? She was kidnapped before, humiliated, and she's already damaged goods. Now, on top of that, she was pregnant with another man's child, and you still want to marry into her family? Are you addicted to being cuckolded?" The moment those words left his mouth, the expressions of the men in line changed. One of them stepped forward, his face filled with anger. "Watch your mouth. Miss Linda was a victim. How dare you speak about her like that? I had heard people say that when she married into your family, she was devoted to her in-laws and attentive to her husband, a rare, truly good woman. And yet, you dared to slander her like that. That is outrageous." "That is right," someone added. "Let's teach him a lesson." Colin was held down and beaten by the angry crowd. In the end, he had no choice but to quietly queue up like everyone else. No one dared to leave, fearing they would have to start over if they came back later. I heard that by the time it was finally Colin's turn, it was already the third day. He and his parents had waited outside without sleep for 3 days straight before they were finally allowed into my villa. As soon as she saw me, Colin's mother began to complain, her eyes red from crying. "Linda, those people outside are like bandits," she said. "Look at what they did to Colin. Even your father made things difficult for us. You are still carrying our family's child. Even if he feels sorry for you, he should not find someone else to marry into the family on your behalf. This is unacceptable. You must talk to him and convince him not to act so recklessly in the future." Colin stood beside her with a cold face and let out a scoff. "We came to take you home," he said. "After all, you are my wife. It is not right for you to keep staying at your parents' house. I am willing to take responsibility for both families. To care for you and the child, to raise the child as my own, and treat you as my wife. But remember, Maria will always be my primary wife." I could not help but laugh, my anger boiling over. Primary wife, secondary wife, it has been decades since the founding of the People's Republic. And you are still dreaming of living in ancient times. Colin's mother glanced at me from head to toe and forced a smile. "The doctors here are really something. It has only been a little over a month. And your health has improved a lot. Before we leave, ask them to come back with us to take care of you." Then she added, "But about those people outside, it is truly outrageous. They are going around saying you had an abortion. That is not just insulting, it is evil." At that moment, I finally broke my silence. "They are right," I said. "I did have an abortion. I have let go of Colin, and I am ready to begin a new life." As soon as I said this, the expressions on all their faces changed completely. "What did you say?" Colin asked, his voice trembling. His mother quickly added, "Linda, do not joke about something like this." I looked at them coldly and said without emotion, "The child is gone. Colin is gone too. I have nothing to do with your family anymore. I will not go back with you. You can leave now, and do not come back." Without waiting for a response, I called the security guards and ordered them to escort the group out. Colin's face twisted in disbelief, his eyes widened, and his expression turned ugly. "Are you crazy? How dare you throw us out?" he shouted. "I already agreed to take responsibility for both families. What more do you want? That is enough with your little drama. If you reject me now, I will never come again. Do not come begging later." His mother forced an awkward smile. "You have clearly put on some weight. How could the child be gone? You must be lying out of anger. Linda, you are still mad about the past, aren't you? Be reasonable. Mom has to scold you. You are too impulsive. You always break our hearts." I was too tired to argue. I simply tossed the abortion report at them. Then I ordered the bodyguards to drive them out. I heard that once they were kicked out, they looked at the report and finally realized that I really had terminated the pregnancy, the only bloodline left in their family. They were furious. For a moment, they even forgot that their survival depended on my father's support. They created a huge scene outside the gate, screaming that I was shameless, accusing me of murdering their child, cursing me and swearing I would get what I deserved. The people still waiting in line finally understood who they were. Remembering how Colin had once called me damaged goods, the crowd became enraged. One after another, they rushed over and beat the family again. This time, far more severely. I heard they ended up lying on the ground, unable to even speak. When my father found out what they had done, including the slander they spread about me, he was furious. From that moment on, he stopped showing mercy and began taking direct action against their family. At first, Colin and his parents still tried to act tough. They said that unless I became pregnant again with another child from their bloodline, they would never allow me to return or pay respects at Colin's grave. They said I would never be welcome there for the rest of my life. But within a month, under my father's pressure, their family went completely bankrupt. They lost everything, even their only villa. In the end, they were left with nothing and ended up on the streets. As for Maria, she had originally set her sights on Alex because he was the eldest son and future heir of the family. When Alex died and she realized that Colin had been pretending to be him, she did not care. As long as someone could inherit the family fortune, that person was good enough to be her husband. But now that the family was broke, she had no interest in suffering with them. Before long, she attached herself to a wealthy businessman and became his mistress, leaving them all behind without hesitation. Colin was furious. In a fit of rage, he cursed Maria and even tried to hit her. As a result, he was almost beaten to death by the wealthy businessman's bodyguards. His parents were both furious and disappointed. They scolded him, saying that none of this would have happened if he had not insisted on pretending to be Alex in the first place. Now, because of him, the entire family was ruined. But Colin, like a drowning man clutching at a straw, suddenly saw a new hope. He turned to his parents and vowed with conviction, "I love Linda so much. If I had known he was still alive, I would never have remarried. I would never have ignored her family. There is still a chance to save everything." Fueled by desperation, he came rushing to my door. He stood outside shouting, claiming he was Colin, not Alex. He said it was his older brother who had died all those years ago, and that he had lost his memory, believing himself to be Alex until recently. Now, he said, everything had come back to him. He said he still loved me, begged me to see him, and even added that since the baby was gone, we could have another one. He told me that he had already forgiven me for having the abortion. Coincidentally, I had just finished gathering all the evidence that proved Colin had orchestrated my kidnapping and abuse. Right at that moment, the police arrived at my doorstep and arrested him. Even as he was being taken away, he shouted and struggled, yelling, "Let me go. Do you know who my wife is? It's Linda. If you dare arrest me, she will never forgive you." Only then did I step out slowly and walk toward him. I leaned in close and whispered calmly into his ear, "Colin, I have always known it was you. Look at yourself now. You are a joke. And it is finally time for you to pay for what you did to me back then." His eyes widened in disbelief. You knew everything." He finally understood why I had been acting so strangely all along. The truth hit him like a wave, and he stopped resisting. His body slumped to the ground, his face turning pale as death. But moments later, he sprang up again. wrapped his arms around my legs, and begged for forgiveness. He said he had done all of this because he loved me. I sneered, had someone drag him away, and turned to walk back into the villa. Extra chapter. Colin. Colin was the kind of man who would never reflect on his own faults, even after falling so far. He still believed it was all Maria's fault. The day after he was arrested, he managed to escape from custody. He did not go into hiding. Instead, in a crazed state, he found Maria and stabbed her to death. When my father learned that Colin was the one who had ordered my kidnapping all those years ago, he was livid. He wanted to break into the prison and tear Colin apart with his own hands. He was also furious that I had never told him any of this, but I smiled and stopped him gently. Dad, someone like him is not worth it. Then I leaned in and whispered something in his ear. He burst into laughter, clapped his hands, and finally gave up the idea of taking revenge himself. With my father's influence, Colin's death sentence was reduced to life imprisonment. After all, death would have been too easy for him. According to the plan I came up with, my father arranged for Colin to be placed with several very special cellmates. One liked men, one enjoyed violent BDSM, and one had a tendency to humiliate others. My father even gave money to their families during prison visits, asking them to look after Colin. He wanted to make sure Colin would live a wonderful life behind bars for the rest of his days. After that, I never remarried. Instead, I joined my father's company and began learning the ropes of business. He would often pat my shoulder with pride and say, "Daughter, I can finally rest easy knowing my empire will be in your hands. You cannot count on men. Good thing you have real talent." Even though he said that, he still worried that I would feel lonely. For a while, he kept trying to find someone suitable to marry into our family, just so I would have some company. The line of men who came to be interviewed stretched from our house to the company gate. I turned every single one of them down. Eventually, he gave up on the idea of a husband and instead found another solution. He began hiring male models. Charming and well-mannered, just to make me happy. He assured me they were all clean, had passed medical exams, and would be rotated regularly. These men would not talk about love, they were only there to bring happiness in exchange for payment. This time, I did not refuse. At the age of 32, I suddenly had the idea of having a child. I went to a sperm bank and made my choice. 10 months later, I gave birth to a daughter, a child that belonged only to me. She looked exactly like I did when I was young. After I officially took over the company, my father retired and stayed at home to care for his granddaughter full-time. With all his affection, the little girl quickly grew into a mischievous rascal. I often found myself helplessly frustrated by her. As for Colin, I took care of Maria's affairs in my brother's name. From then on, I never allowed anyone to mention anything about bearing the responsibility for both families. I did not want Maria's name brought up lightly again, but my father would not let it go. "I spoiled you so much, and still you suffered so much pain when I was not paying attention. That is why my precious granddaughter must be even more spoiled. I will make sure she never suffers anything in her life." When my daughter was 2 years old, one night, half asleep in my arms, she murmured softly, "Mom, I actually saw you a long time ago." I smiled and asked teasingly, "How long ago was that?" She frowned in thought and replied, "I don't remember very well. I just remember you saying that if you gave birth to me, you were scared I'd be born without an anus, so you told me to come to you later." A few years passed. One day, she looked up at me with wide eyes and asked, "Mom, what does without an anus mean?" I was caught completely off guard. I smiled awkwardly and said, "Go to sleep. You're just a little kid. Why do you ask so many questions?" The end. Thank you for watching today's story. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, so feel free to share your opinions. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more great stories. We'll see you in the next video.